4 on a circle. Goalies, you stretch for a minute. 4 in a circle, let's go. It's not something that comes up. Some are surprised to know it actually happened. Here you go. And then some quiz me a little bit about whether it's really true or not. Okay, black on this blue line.
Before Mark Manney became the head coach at Andover, he really had his head in the clouds. For 6 years, Manney was a pilot on Air Force One. Yes, that Air Force One. Mark was born in Morris, Minnesota, and then lived in Bemidji. His family moved to Moorhead when he was 13 years old. Mark was a standout for the Spuds and received interest from college teams, one in particular, the Air Force Academy. His Spuds coach, Terry Shirkliff, thought a military school would be good for him. Mark had no family members in the military. He'd only been on an airplane once in his life. But he took a leap of faith. And after 4 years of schooling and playing hockey at Air Force, it was time to sink or swim or fly.
When I got to flying, I hadn't really even thought about being a pilot. And so it was difficult at first, but eventually you either take to it or you don't.
Turns out, Mark not only took to it, he loved it. After graduation, he flew cargo planes in Southern California with the 63rd Airlift Wing. That led to several years on special assignment flying foreign and domestic dignitaries, and eventually he was chosen to pilot the most recognizable airplane in the world. During his first 2 years, Mark flew missions for President Bill Clinton.
President Clinton came up, I guess, a fair amount, and he liked people, so he'd talk, and he's very interested in you. And he'd ask where you were from, and you'd tell him, and then he'd tell a story about where you're from, and kind of think, well, that's pretty cool that he knows about Minnesota. And then he'd go on to the next guy and ask where they were from, and tell a little story about them, and then he'd leave the flight deck, and everybody'd go, man, that was pretty cool.
Mark's next 4 years were with President George W. Bush.
President Bush was a lot of the same qualities, but he was a guy who wanted to check things off on his task list, and so he was busy. Maybe not as engaging or personable that way, but in his own way was a very warm, kind-hearted man as well. But he didn't have a lot of time for idle chit-chat. That was just his nature. Heads up.
Back on the ice, it's a subject that rarely comes up.
Attaboy.
Mark prefers to stay rather quiet and humble.
In an annoying way, yes. He will go out of his way to point the light on someone else rather than himself.
Harry, let's go again. 3 on 2. Come on, Harry.
Manny was talking, and he was talking about him flying Air Force One. I looked at my buddy and I said, did Manny actually fly Air Force One? And they said, yeah, and I was like, no way. And so I looked him up, and yeah, he flew Air Force One. It astonished me.
Once in a while, there's an innocent discovery somewhere, like in an attic.
I just reach into a box and I just see a holiday card from George W. Bush, personally signed, handwritten to Mark and his family. And I'm like, this is sitting in your attic? This would be like next to my mantle or something, like an important spot. This is a perfect thing. He's just like, yeah, I got a few of those.
Most of Mark's mementos are safely stored away. He and his family moved from Washington, D.C. to Andover 11 years ago. After being in charge of the most important airplane in the world, he's now in charge of this group.
What are you doing, yoga out here?
Which is the most important thing to him.
That's a really cool transition and very humble, and no task is too small for him. And that's probably why he's so successful in life, which is, awesome.
He's a kid from up north in Moorhead. You never would expect that a kid from a small town in Minnesota would be able to fly the president around, but yeah, it's pretty cool.